All right, so we're starting our unit on trigonometry. So before we get too far into it, I kind of wanted to do a pre-17.1, right triangle trigonometry. This is things that you learned last year in Math 2, or you should have covered last year in Math 2. We have this little acronym, SOGATOA. It stands for the sine is the opposite over hypotenuse, cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, tangent is opposite over adjacent. SOGATOA is remembering which side goes with which trig function. The three trig functions are sine, cosine, and tangent. You spell sine all the way out, it'd have an E there. And it allows us to find missing angles or sides of a right triangle. So if we have this triangle, theta is whatever angle we're looking for. So the sine of theta is equal to the opposite side. So opposite side means across from. Adjacent means it's actually the side that's touching our angle. And of course, hypotenuse is always opposite of the 90 degree. It's always the longest side. So the sine is the opposite over the hypotenuse. Cosine of theta is the adjacent over hypotenuse. Tangent of theta is opposite over adjacent. Or, tangent's also known. It's sine over cosine. And we can talk tomorrow about why that is. But basically, I just want to review on how to find some missing sides of right triangles, because it's going to come up and you're going to have to know how to do it. So I thought we'd just review it. So here we have our first example. We can never use the 90 degrees as the reference angle. We have to use the other angle. So I'm going to draw my little man. He's standing here. That's my reference angle. So x to the angle is the opposite, and the 10 is the hypotenuse. So I need to think to myself, which of the three trig functions uses opposite and hypotenuse? Well, that's sine. So I say the sine of 53, and it's pronounced sine, not sin, is equal to the opposite over the hypotenuse. Now, from here, we need to use our calculators. You will need a scientific calculator. If you don't have one, you need to come to class with one. And we're going to set it up as a proportion, and I'm going to cross multiply. So that gives me 1 times x equals 10 times the sine of 53 degrees. You got to remember, those two things, they go together. You can't separate them. So from here, we punch it into our calculators. Most of your calculators, depending on how you enter things, if you can see things as you type it in, then you're going to push the sine button, the 53, and then you're going to hit the times, and then the 10, and then the equal. Now, if your calculator doesn't display it as you type it, you actually have to enter the angle first, then the sine button, then times, 10, and equal. Please, the other thing to check is make sure on your screen it doesn't say R or G, R, A. It actually says D, E, G. You want that to show. Most of your calculators will default to that. So when you do this, play around with your calculator, you should get x to be 7.99, and that is rounded. It's an estimate. Make note of which method works for your calculator so that you can keep track of that and use that same method each time. Here, we need to find x. So this is our reference angle down here. 24 is the angle. A, the 8 side is your adjacent, and x is the hypotenuse. So you need to think to yourself, which of the trig functions uses adjacent and hypotenuse? That is the cosine of 24. That's equal to the adjacent divided by the hypotenuse. And we're going to go about this the same way that we did before. We're going to put a 1 underneath it, and we're going to cross multiply. That's x times the cosine of 24 equals 1 times 8. 1 times 8 is just simply 8. And to get x by itself, I'm going to divide out the cosine of 24. So not always will you multiply the values together. There are times that you will divide. And we're going to divide. We should get x to be about 8.76 rounded. Please check on your calculators to make sure that you know how to use it when you come into class tomorrow. That way, if something comes up and you don't know and you have questions, we can get them answered in class. All right, our last example we have up here, we're actually finding an angle. So it's a little bit different, but this is where our reference angle is. This is the opposite side. This is the adjacent side. So we're going to use opposite and adjacent tangent. So we say the tangent of A, because I don't know what the angle is, that is what I'm looking for, is equal to the opposite over the adjacent. Now, to get A by itself, I have to divide by tangent, but we don't really divide by them, we do what's called the inverse. So A is equal to the inverse of the tangent 4 over 9. This is all calculator work. So on our calculators, we actually want to push the tangent to the -1. To get that, usually you have to hit the second tangent button. You want to put parentheses in 4, and then you're going to go, let's see, let me write this a little bit better. Then you're going to hit divide. So we want the parenthesis 4 divide 9. Close that parenthesis. And we should get an answer for A, and this is an angle, and it comes out to be about 23.96 degrees. We usually round, unless we're told otherwise, angles to be to the nearest whole degree and the sides the nearest tenth, but they'll tell you specifically where they want you to round it. So please make sure you know how to use your calculator coming into class tomorrow.